It's my pleasure now to bring back our expert with us for this morning, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, you're with us here? Oh, there
Yes,
I see your shining face. I'm so glad to have you back with us on studio. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, Lis. How are you doing? Good to be with you this morning.
I'm doing great. You know, this is such a sad case in all ways, of course, and also a mystery. This man is now being tried for the third time. Of course, we know that the first two times he was convicted and those convictions were overturned. Overturned for two different reasons. One time the case was overturned because the prosecutor did not turn over to the other side that one of the witnesses had been a paid informant. Now, both times, the reason that the case was overturned did not go really to what you would call the forensic analysis, right? I mean, it did not go to what you would look into in a case, right?
Yep, you're right. And these are, well, in one sense, you know, it's all about procedure, whether you're talking about forensics or what I like to refer to as just good old-fashioned shoe leather and what's produced at the end of everything from an investigative standpoint. Keep in mind, and I hope that the folks that are listening will understand this, the police, the prosecutor, and the forensics people, they're involved in this business day in and day out. They know where the boundaries are. They know where, to put it in a golf metaphor, they know where the out of bounds area is. You know, you have to understand this going forward. What should be turned over? What should be released? Because, you know, what if this guy had, you know, because of procedural error, had been walking the streets? It's a very dangerous position to put not just the courts in. It's a dangerous position to put the community in if the police and the prosecutor believe that this guy is this monster that they've created him to be. You should be very careful in how you're going through each and every little step along the way. You have to check yourself. You have to check one another to make sure that everything has been released so that you're not going to screw it up. Now we're how many years downrange? This is back in 1990. You know, things, you know, you lose evidence, people's memories fade, all these things. If you had just gotten it right the first time out of the box, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Okay, now, to be fair, you're assuming, just gotten it right, you're assuming that he's guilty.
No, it's not necessarily an assumption of guilt. It's from the perspective.
I'm gonna cut you off. Right. I'm gonna cut you off right there because I think that raises a fascinating question, and I think we have you for all morning. So I'm gonna have you keep you on the hook there just for a little bit, and I'm gonna go to Captain David Perrick, fire investigator. Let's hear some of his testimony, and we'll come right back in just a little bit. But let's go to Captain David Perrick right now. Okay, Joseph, I left you kind of hanging there with your last answer, and I apologize for doing that. But when you said in the last go-round, you said if they'd just gotten it right the last time, what did you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that it's when I teach, which I do daily, forensic science to my students, I have to, you know, I always remind them that it's almost like making a cake. There are just certain steps that you have to take procedurally that you have to be adherent to, and if there are documents that need to be released, you should be well aware that these documents must be released in you know, just in the spirit of discovery.
Right.
Your task with doing that, everything has to be made available, and if you feel as though your case is solid enough, you shouldn't have a problem with releasing documents. Do your due diligence, do everything that you need to do so that you're an open book, if you will. And that way problems don't arise in the future. Now, granted, every now and then things slip through the crack. Sometimes it's just human error. Other times you're not doing your due diligence, you're not paying attention to what you need to pay attention to.
You know, you make an excellent point, and, you know, as a former prosecutor, of course, prosecutors are held to ethical standards. Brady material has to be handed over. Brady material, of course, meaning things that could be exculpatory to the other side, to the defense. You have to hand over material. That's, I think, where the prosecution got into real trouble in this case on the second go-around when they didn't hand over the material about that paid informant, that paid witness. Remember, that's where the prosecution got in a heap of trouble, and so much so that it was actually overturned in the second go-around in this case. So, you know, you're talking about the forensics. You're also talking about, you know, how cases can be overturned.
Yes. Yeah, you're, you know, foundationally, you know, you're destroying the entire structure here. Think about, you know, people at home will just think about all of the man hours that go into a case like this. This is not a huge metropolis that these people are living in. There's a lot of manpower, man hours that have gone into this. And just by simply making an error like this, you've destroyed everything, for at least in the time being, that everyone else has done. And that's
right.
a horrible position to put yourself and your colleagues in.
Right, and think of the captains and the detectives that have been working. Speaking of one, we're going to go to Captain David Carpenter now and listen to his testimony. That we're going to listen to a replay of that testimony. Listen carefully. We'll come back after that to analyze. Joseph, it's a pretty tough testimony there. An accelerant is used. We know what that accelerant is, was. The little girl was burned. Pretty tough facts.
Yeah, they really are. But again, it's about, as an investigator, staying in your lane and staying focused on what you have to do. And I'm sure that this gentleman did it at that moment in time. They're trying to find anything that they possibly can that is going to give us tie back to a construct that we talk about in forensics that's referred to as individualization. That is something that makes that piece of evidence unique to a particular individual or source, if you will. In this particular case, they're talking about the accelerant. Did you notice what he said? He said that when these items were moved beneath the buttock, they got a whiff of gas, and this is a soil sample that they're taking. This would actually be when gas was applied to this area. We are assuming that it is gasoline or some type of accelerant like that. When they apply this, some of this is not burned, Lis. You still have some of this left behind, a remnant that will be left behind, so they take that soil sample out of there. Now, I know that this is horrific. I know that the circumstances are terrible. But for the investigators, we are mandated to look beyond the terror and the horror in that moment, do what we have to do our job, collect this evidence in a way, in a manner that it remains admissible, and process that evidence, and keeping our chain of evidence intact.
Well, you're almost finding a signature. You know, there were no eyewitnesses there, and as we've talked about, this is a crime that is now 28 years old, so it makes it even harder. There were no eyewitnesses even at the time. But what you're saying is, I believe, you know, translated into our ears is, even so, there are eyewitnesses in the crime itself, in the forensics itself. It does leave its own witnesses, right? Yeah,
the evidence will, in fact, I'm not a real big fan of metaphors in science, but the evidence will, in fact, speak to you. It's more of a Hollywood device, I guess. But yeah, there is a specific signature that is left behind that, again, back to individualization. This makes these particular items unique to this set of circumstances, and hopefully unique to the individual that applied these items to this little girl's body before she was ignited.
Right. Joseph, please bear with us. We're going to be going to a short break, and we'll be with you on the other side on the Stanley Liggins case out of Iowa. We'll be analyzing it more for you. We'll be right back with Law and Crime.
Bring her back, but we want to know why. And that will give us some sort of healing, never closure, but at least some sort of healing just to know why.
And if you have any information about the murder, the 1991 murder of Jaquetta Thomas, you're urged to call North Carolina Wanted at 1-866-43-WANTED. Again, that's 1-866-43-WANTED. For the Law and Crime Network, I'm Vincent Hill. Thank you.
Welcome back to Law and Crime and the Stanley Liggins case out of Iowa. We've been following that. We're looking back at some of the courtroom drama now. What an interesting case. Remember now, we're talking about a case that is 28 years old, the third time around for this case. It's been tried. He's been found guilty twice. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court in that case and overturned. And there are many now analysts that are saying, did he do it? Did he not do it? We're not so sure. Now he's facing another trial, third time around. Witnesses, some of them are not around. Some of them have died. The forensic analysis or the forensic testimony is still there. And the evidence is still there, as we've got our friend Joseph who's going to be talking more about this morning. But it's harder. It's just harder to try a case when it's 28 years old. But we do still have some of the witnesses, and they have been testifying. And one of them is the neighbor, Mary Ann Watson, and she was a neighbor at the time. And we're going to listen to her very carefully. We're going to come to on the other side of listening to her and have some analysis of her testimony. But listen in now. So that's the neighbor testifying that she saw little Jennifer speaking with the driver of a vehicle. Now, the Jennifer, of course, is the little victim, the little 9-year-old girl who was found strangled and mutilated and burned behind a school. I mean, it's just such a horrible story. We've got Joseph Morgan here with us. Hi, Joseph. Bring you back again. Now, you are a death forensic analyst. What did you make, though, of this testimony from the neighbor who saw this kind of going back and forth with this little girl and the man in the vehicle?
Yeah, isn't that something that kind of breathes life into this a little bit, doesn't it? You know, you have a first-person witness there that's describing what she saw. You know, you mentioned just a few moments ago, coming out of the break, how this case is so old now. Right. And these people, you know, they've lost that. You know, these events seem to have passed, and the people are no longer, you know, they're just facsimiles now. But seeing a witness like this can truly breathe life back into this. Again, goes back to forensics. We tell a tale, don't we? We're not just scientists, but we're also historians. We mark a period in time, and that can carry forward for years and years to come with the evidence that we collect. How do we go about it? And telling their tale historically, you know, what happened to these people. We look at these photographs here, and it was very real for these people at that moment in time. I'm sure that this woman that's on the stand has relived this over and over again in her mind's eye over all of these years. Yes, I'm sure she has. And we have actually another witness, another neighbor, so to bring more life to this case. Now, remember, guys, 28 years this case is. That's how old this case is. 28 years, these neighbors have relived it. 28 years now later, they're taking the stand. Diane Pemberton, another witness, now is taking the stand. Another witness, another neighbor of the victim took the stand. Let's hear what she had to say. Very interesting. So there we had a family friend who was supposed to have a meeting with the defendant. That meeting did not transpire, but then he later heard about the victim going missing, and then all the crying. Joseph Scott Morgan, are you still there? He is. Oh, I love seeing your shining face on this rainy day in New York. It's absolutely miserable here on this. It was a heat wave last week, and now it's just kind of rainy and pathetic here today. But anyway, so this last witness, the last couple of witnesses really have kind of breathed a little bit of life into you know, this
trial with pictures and everything from the witnesses, and now this live testimony. But really interesting, right? That he was supposed to meet with Liggins. Liggins didn't show up. There was then a lot of going on. What do you think? Do you think that brings to this case?
Well, I think that what it brings is kind of this linear timeline that goes out. And we talk about this a lot in investigations. Time is the most precious thing that you have when you're trying to put pieces together leading up to the discovery of the deceased, as well as from an investigative standpoint, from forensics, what we're trying to piece together as far as how long someone has been passed on. However, in this particular case, what the prosecution was trying to describe here and kind of put before the court's eyes is this idea that there was a progression that took place that's benchmarked along the way. There are these specific benchmarks that we look to that paint this picture of the relationship that the alleged perpetrator had with all the other players in these events. Also, we think about putting the alleged perpetrator into the presence of the victim. Did he have time to facilitate this horrible case and the death of this young girl? Did he have time, relative to accountability? Where was he?
Yeah, and Joseph, and you're exactly right. And the time period is crucial here because he did not meet with that last witness, which he was supposed to do. So stay tuned because that was critical. For more on the other side, we'll be right back. Well, Mr. Zapian remembered some things, but not a lot. Now, he was inside the house, as he said, but not outside. And on his direct, he said he remembered seeing Stanley, but, not much. And it could be that just 28 years in passing. Joseph Scott Morgan, I've got you here with me. It's exactly what we were talking about before the break, right? That trying these cases 28 years later, even when you have live people as opposed to transcripts, they just don't, and we're not saying they're making stuff up or lying or fabricating or anything. They just may not remember as much. And when you say, do you recall, it's not what they said that day they remember, it's what they remember now that they have to testify to.
Yeah, Lis, hey, I tell you what, let's you and I have a discussion about specifically what we remember from 1990. I don't even recall the entire year, much less a specific day after all of these years. And they're tasking this guy with doing this. And I think a lot of people out there would say, oh my gosh, it was a horrible day, and this little girl died on this particular day, or she was found, not that particular day, but, approximating that particular time and all these sorts of things. Your memory fades over a period of time. Like you rightly said, even though this is a living, breathing human being who was supposedly there, during this critical moment in time, what can you expect of this man up on the stand to recall specific details? This is a Herculean task at best, and I really wonder, does this play into the hands of the defense in this particular case? Because it draws into question, the veracity, not necessarily veracity, but just the validity, if you will, of what of this witness that's being put forward here.
Yeah, I thought maybe the only reason they had him on the stand was to actually show that Liggins was there that day. We'll come back more, but now let's get on the lead investigator, Don Schaefer, on the case. Let's get him on the stand. Let's have him actually talk about what he saw, what he found out, and we'll come back and analyze more on that. That's the lead investigator in the Stanley Liggins case. Joseph Scott Morgan, who's with me here for the whole morning. I'm so glad that you're with me here on this rainy day in New York. My impression of this lead investigator, correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression, Joseph, is that he's very good, He really is going and telling the jury exactly what he did in a very methodical way, getting that duct tape, going through and really lining up what he did, and going through and managing that and sort of marking that with the garbage bag and what was going on lining that up to, identifying that with the garbage bag. I mean, just very good, solid police work, don't you think?
Yeah, one of the keys to being an effective investigator is how well you're going to be able to communicate findings to everyone else, not just in the court, but in your reports. Does he come across as credible? He's not all over the board. He's very succinct, very specific, and you're right. He marks this very well.
Yeah, I was very impressed. Not overly confident, but just step by step, telling us what he did, going through. And again, because this case is so old, the prosecution really has a couple of, demerits against them that way as far as just getting the evidence. And so things like the duct tape and marking it to that garbage can really becomes, or that garbage bag really becomes so incredibly important. And to have a lead investigator like this one on the stand like this and being able to just mark it through is just absolutely even more critical. And I think that he's doing this case. This is Don Schaefer, the lead investigator. We're going to have more from him on the other side of this break, but I think it's just really important for you all to understand, and I get it with all of us, how critical it is in this kind of case. We have Stanley Liggins on the case for the third time of his trial for murder of this little girl. Okay, the silver substance, the color now being brought back. The same gray substance, the silver substance, is now the investigator may be able to link it back to our defendant, Joseph Scott Morgan. Do I still have you there? I see your shining face. Yay. So good investigative work. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Every element in this case is critical to creating the picture that they're trying to create, going back in time after all these years, and the specific origins of the substance. Is it duct tape? Is it not duct tape? Also combined with the plastic covering that she was cocooned in as well. So yeah, this is all critical to the case, painting the picture, and he's doing a fine job. Right,
and it is, we have to just step back here for a second, folks, and remember, 28-year-old case, man's been tried twice, and convictions overturned for various reasons that really don't have to do with his guilt or innocence. But we're now stuck 28 years later, and with forensic evidence that is really absolutely key. So stuff like the garbage bag, the duct tape, become absolutely critical. They always are very important, but they become so important and absolutely critical in a case like this, because you never did have an eyewitness. But you don't have an eyewitness. And the witnesses that you do have, as we saw with Mr. Zabian before, don't recall, don't remember, and you can't really impeach them because it's been 28 years later. Join us back in just a moment for more on Law and Crime. All right, here's somebody then who thought he had some information and was submitting that right away. Joseph, I'm glad to have you back here. So here we've had a couple of live witnesses, a police officer, former officer, and then a detective before him. What are you making now that we've been able to have some forensic analysis, and now then somebody who actually was there at the scene or thought he might have seen something be brought in? Anything more kind of bringing it into the case here for you? Anything more kind of coming together for you here for the prosecution? It's a tough case for the prosecution, I'm thinking.
Yeah, because you essentially have to resurrect all of this data from the past and breathe life back into it. And a lot of this goes to how well has the prosecution prepared themselves moving forward. I can't imagine this is a daunting task to put these people on the stand, and again, I hate to overuse this, but breathe life back into this case. It's been, passed on, now for 28 years, over and over. And it would seem that there are other landmines along the way, because you've got kind of these other two previous cases that are there boldly before you that have occurred already in this particular case. So you're having to revisit all of this stuff again. It makes it, I think that there are landmines along the way for the prosecution, because they don't want to, they don't want to do anything that's going to impact how the case moves forward based upon things that have already been stated in trial.
Right, exactly. And the defense, of course, has earlier transcripts, earlier things that they can go back, and if any of the witnesses either live or, well, certainly live on testimony contradicts anything they've said before, whether, just by mistake, if somebody misremembers just even the smallest detail, the defense can come back and say, aha.
I think one of the things for me that's very curious about this, I'm thinking about the people that are, having to listen to this to make a judgment about it. It seems very, very confusing, convoluted, because you're always revisiting again the context and all these things that have previously been stated, and it's highly complex and intricate, if you will.
It is so true. Let's go now to Antonio Holmes. He's a witness here outside of that liquor store. Very important key to that liquor store plays into this whole scenario. So let's take a look at what he has to say. We've been listening to Brenda Adams. She is the then girlfriend of the defendant, Stanley Liggins, and talking about Stanley Liggins, his behavior. We're going to be listening to more about his demeanor, what he said to her then, what she observed about him at or about the time that little Jennifer went missing. It's fascinating stuff. I've had with me this morning Joseph Scott Morgan. I'm told in my ear that I've got to let him go. I'm threatening to take out the thing in my ear, my IFB, and saying so I don't actually have to hear that. Joseph, of course, has been with me all morning, and I appreciate so much him being with us. I guess you've got to run off to Jacksonville State University there and teach in Alabama. I guess you had to go to some class, right? But wouldn't your students just rather see you here?
Well, yeah, but of course they have their studies they have to attend to, and I have to attend to them. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, we so much appreciate your having been here today and been with us in this very, very important case. As of course, you know that Stanley Liggins is being tried now for the third time. This is a 1990 case, and this is a very, very important case, of course, first-degree murder. We'll be right back on the other side. Thank you so much for staying with us.